Um, so far, much of the excitement around AI has focused on large language models, and for good reason. They've redefined what we think computers can do, from writing and coding to conversation. But AI is now moving beyond composing text. It's about seeing, planning, acting, and reasoning. The next frontier combines all of these abilities, potentially changing everything from customer service to healthcare to how supply chains operate. But with these new capabilities, things could also get messy. It's a fine line between Tomorrowland techno-optimism and Black Mirror-like dystopia. So what comes next? To help us answer these questions, please welcome Seth Dobrin, founder and CEO of Qantm AI ethics specialist Natalia Domagala, and Fernando Lucini, the global lead for data science and machine learning and engineering at Accenture. Please welcome them to the stage. Thanks, guys. Obviously, one of the things everybody's talking about that's sort of coming beyond large language models is AI agents. So my first question is, Seth, what is an AI agent, and do they actually work?
Yeah, so that's a kind of a loaded question, and I kind of think of AI agents in two buckets. So one is large language model AI agents, and one is small model AI agents. Large language AI agents are, in my mind, things that we should have been doing with large language models all along. And this is taking large language models and putting them into action through prompts. I don't really think they're, like I said, anything different than we should have been doing all along, and advanced companies were doing them from the beginning. And there's much less risk, I think, with large language model AI agents than there are with small language model AI agents, but there's also a lot more interesting things you can do with small model AI agents. And so the risks with small model AI agents are that you have a whole bunch of small models that represent highly specialized tasks or highly specialized individuals, if you will, and understanding what those things can do in large numbers and controlling them, predicting what they're going to do, can be challenging, and so you need other AIs to do that. How do you manage those AIs? Gets interesting.
It sounds complicated. Fernando, I mean, do you think this stuff works, and do you have a good definition of what an agent actually is?
It's interesting because when I think of the AI agent definition, you think of some people touting the autonomous part of the agent or the agency of it, which I'm sure Natalia will have some commentary on, versus not. Look, the way I see it is reasonably simple, which is we need these AIs, these language models to do interesting things, and we do interesting things in the real world, so we need these things to interact. So agents are a good moniker for the things that we need AI to do in the real world. With that comes a lot of challenges, and I think the way I think of it with my customers is we need to dare to dream. There's no other new game in town, so for every you here that's in a company, all the kind of the playbooks are done. This is the only new game in town, but there are issues, right? We need to deal with reasoning, we need to deal with planning, we need to deal with memory, we need to deal with LLMs lying to us. So there's a lot of interesting things to deal with, but it's the new game in town. So I do think they're going to be important and interesting, but I don't tend to stick on the definition of autonomy versus not, because then there'd be dragons that I think Natalia will help us untangle.
Yeah, I want to go to Natalia. What are the risks here as we move into a world where you have AI systems that are actually taking actions in the real world?
I think the biggest risk is that the pace of regulation is unfortunately quite a lot slower than the pace of innovation. And we've just managed to get our heads around generative AI, and now we have agentic AI. And I think that the risks are that, unfortunately, we currently, at least in this country, we don't have any oversight frameworks, and there are issues such as transparency. So when I was at the UK government, I actually worked on introducing transparency to the public sector. And it took us years to develop a framework, to encourage departments to publish it. And then this was just very simple algorithms, simple applications of AI. So if we scale this up, if we look at generative AI and then agentic AI, I think we really need to be more careful about how we talk about it, what kind of data we use to train it, how do we explain that to people as well, because those models will be used in all sorts of applications that can have real-world consequences. So that's one risk. Another risk is accountability, and I think that's probably the most pressing question here, which is, if something goes wrong with agentic AI, who's responsible for that? Is it the company that developed it? Is it a company or a public sector organization that deploys it? Is it, who ultimately, if a decision affects somebody's life, and this might sound dramatic, but I used to work in the public sector, and the way we would deploy AI actually had those real, very dramatic at times consequences. So if this happens with agentic AI, who's accountable, who's responsible? How do we make sure that people who are affected actually are able to get redress? I can keep going, but...
Yeah. Fernando, I wanted to come back to you and ask, so far, what are we seeing as sort of the best examples of use cases of agentic AI within businesses? How are people actually deploying them?
So, being practical, most of the things that, and there's a lot being done, let's be clear, maybe not in the autonomous, self-thinking, all that kind of stuff, but there's a lot being done in just stuff that doesn't require the non-determinism of models, so simple decisioning, right? Even within Accenture, we use it very extensively with our HR system, so how we help ourselves to things within the firm is agentified. How we run our marketing function, some of our marketing folks are in the room and can tell you about it, how we run that, how we run research. So doing research within companies is very agentified because it's a very efficient way to tap into data, right? So generally speaking, you see a lot of use cases in practical things that don't require for you to delve deep into whether these things are lying to you or whether, to Natalia's point, whether the decision is practical or impractical. They're literally left-right decisions, go get, go solve, go summarize, et cetera, et cetera. And that we're seeing more and more and more. While the market matures, how do I deal with what I call the agent whispers, right? An agent that talks to an agent that talks to an agent, and within 3 hoops, nobody remembers anything. But there's quite a lot of that. So research, really big. Traffic handling in any company, really big. HR, and I say HR, by the way, serving the customer, right? Serving the end customer, which is us. Marketing, immense amount. Operations, a lot in operations. A lot in document handling. So, hey, I get this document, I just extract a few things from it, and I then take a set of steps when I'm purchasing. I think one of the fascinating use cases, Jeremy, we're going to see is in this tariff world. I'm not going to open that box of nightmares, but in that world, where you're going to have to do a lot of paperwork to solve situations, these things do very interesting things without having to deal with any ethical problem. They're literally just handling documents, handling decisions. Can I give you a dumb example?
Yeah, absolutely.
If you import into the UK and you see an import document and it says, I have 1,000 paper clips and it weighs 2 tons, the average human will say 1,000 paper clips don't weigh 2 tons. You can probably get a language model to do that and not totally screw it up. And that could be very helpful. So there's plenty of examples of things like this that you could use.
Yeah, on some of those use cases, to get back to these ethical issues around accountability, if something goes wrong, currently, like Accenture, you get the tool to go out and do a research report for you, but something's not correct. Who's accountable for that?
So we train our people to, and I love Natalia's view on this, we train our people to be clear that these are just tools that serve you and do interesting things for you, but you don't get to be devoid, remove your mind from the problem. If you do that, you're on your own. So we put a lot of very strong controls on these agents, so we control the lying as much as possible, the fidelity and all these things. But at the end of the day, if you're using it for research, you are accountable and trained to understand that it is just a collection of information tool, and it can and will lie to you. So you do need to check the facts. So we do make sure people understand these things are not fact truth machines. You can't remove the human from this, otherwise we're all lost.
Interesting. Seth, I mean, what are you seeing as the sort of most interesting use cases here for agents?
I think Fernando hit on a lot of them, and I think it's important to understand that these agents, especially when they're backed by large language models, and I think I'm going to get into one of the next questions, are really focused on only a limited number of use cases, albeit very high value use cases. And to kind of lump them into a few buckets, it's really around knowledge management, it's around workflow optimization, it's around discovery. So by knowledge management, and tying these all together. So discovery management, think materials discovery, think pharmaceutical discovery, molecule discovery, things like that, workflow management, process optimization, coding, next best action, supply chain optimization, import and export. So those are all things that you're seeing in terms of use case. And I'm not saying it's not powerful. I use it all the time. And content creation. So where am I seeing it? I see it in terms of helping customers reinvent their workflows. So a lot of software development. I also have a venture fund that I run. There's a lot of startups that are single or two founder startups writing 95% of their code by AI. Now, a startup doing that versus a enterprise doing that, those are two fundamentally different things, because a startup has a code base of nothing when they start. Enterprise has a code base that exists, and you can't refactor your code every time. As an enterprise, every time you do a release, a startup can refactor their code every time. So those are two fundamentally different things. But you can, as an enterprise, use AI to write your code, and as a starting point, check your code, document your code. Those are very valuable things. See that all the time. The other thing is content creation, marketing. Lots of enterprises are using that. Cybersecurity is a really good place, a really big place that I'm seeing a lot of and helping a lot of enterprises with. We'll hear later from WPP and others around content creation. That's great.
I'm going to go to the audience for questions in a minute, so please think of your questions. Raise your hand and wait till a mic handler comes to you. Fernando, we talked a little bit about agents. What else are you kind of looking at and have your eye on that's maybe beyond language models? What are you kind of looking at that's coming down the pike?
God, you don't have enough with language models? Troubles with having to make them work sensibly? To what Natalia has spoken about a little bit, I am a total geek, so hands up, I'm the geek in the room, but I'm very excited about things like benchmarks. They're very behind. This is shocking. We were talking a little bit backstage about it. I'm really looking forward to a lot of the tooling that we all need to make this work sensibly in the enterprise. Because it's mostly, this is stuff that's for consumers, right?
Yeah.
So I'm excited about a lot of that stuff. So as an engineer, text is my field. So everything that's happening is overwhelming, and to some degree, how do we put it in a box of use that becomes the day-to-day tool?
Yeah, and Natalia, do you think we have the benchmarks we really need to understand the capabilities and where these systems kind of fail? Are we in the right place with benchmarks?
I think we still have a long way to go. But what I am excited about, to turn this perhaps into a more optimistic remark, I think right now we do have a lot of understanding in the industry as well that we really need to get this right from the ethical perspective. And actually what you've just said, Fernando, about how AI is being used at Accenture, I think that's a really positive example of people being trained up and understanding that it is indeed just a tool, and we cannot fall down the path of AI determinism and say that AI decided something, so we have to go through with it. I think it's really, really crucial to continue developing skills like critical thinking and making sure that our workforces are ready for what's coming and are able to challenge some of the decisions that AI systems make.
Yeah, so don't forget those critical thinking skills. All right, questions from the audience. Please raise your hand if you have a question. If not, I've got plenty more to keep going. I'm not seeing any right now, so I'm going to keep going. I think you said, Fernando, that getting back to agents, that you currently spend about 90% of the time telling the agent what not to do. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you have to sort of design the guardrails around these systems, how you have to design the prompts around these systems to actually get them to work effectively?
So it's a quote from one of our customers who just very angrily said, "Oh, we spend 90% of our time telling these things what not to do." And the point is that the non-determinism is helpful for a consumer because it's good fun. It's unhelpful for me as a banker when I'm trying to get this thing to do something sensible and I can't get it to just go off the rails. So this is something that the whole industry is trying to work out. These things are not designed to be truthful machines, so that's okay, but it's part of life. So companies are going to have to, I think the biggest IP for companies in the next 12 months is for them to figure out how to put these guardrails in place when the research and industry is moving like super fast and you can't really grab it. There's things that Google are trying to do which are magnificent to try and make this seem more truthful. There's things that a lot of researchers are doing. But at the moment, there's nothing that a company can go off and buy and say, I'm going to buy that thing, which is going to make me create a chatbot for my customer that is going to be truthful and is going to be fun. It's going to be flexible. It's going to have all this decisioning, but it's not going to get me in trouble when a hacker tries to hack me to make me look stupid. So guardrails, and you talked a little bit about that, are immature because the thing is moving so fast in the direction of the consumer. That's the reality.
Yeah, and Seth, you talked about small models a little bit. Is it the case with small models, if we couple many small models together, that you can get better reliability, or is actually, also Fernando talked about the compounding problem. If you have a chain of small models and one is inaccurate, then and they're picking up on that inaccuracy and then compounding it as it moves down the chain. What's your view on, are small models helpful in that regard, or actually harmful because you have this compounding error issue?
Yeah, so I think it's important to understand that the T in ChatGPT means transformer, and the transformer architecture is inherently flawed. Especially when you get into large models. The architecture was never meant to be this large, and bigger is not better for a transformer architecture. And the bigger it gets, the more likely it is to hallucinate and give incorrect answers, and the more stochastic it gets. And so you have incorrect answers and you have randomness. And so when you go to smaller models with more dense data, with more specific data, you get less hallucination. If someone tells you it doesn't hallucinate, they don't know what they're talking about or they're lying. And so when you go to smaller models with more dense data, with more industry-specific data or more task-specific data, you get a much lower hallucination rate. Even with thousands of small models, you will get much more accurate data, so you actually will get a better answer, much more reliable answer, still not deterministic.
And you've talked a little, Seth, I know we were talking before about what's potentially beyond transformers.
Yeah.
Are there other types of models altogether that you think may be more effective?
Yeah, so you get into things that are more transparent, more explainable, like neurosymbolic, which is combining rules with deep learning, even rules with generative AI, or Bayesian, which is kind of prior, so you tell it where you want to start. Or neuromorphic compute, which operates more like the brain. These are more explainable architectures. Neurosymbolic and Bayesian were intractable before because you couldn't set these rules and priors at scale. Actually, these language models help you do that at scale, and so it's interesting that you can do these. And there's other types of architectures that are more efficient or more transparent than generative AI or large language models. That's the other thing about these small models, is you can do them at scale. They're smaller, so they're more energy efficient. Some of them even can run without GPUs, and so they're much more scalable.
Natalia, from a governance standpoint, what do you think about that idea of getting to totally different architectures for these models? Would that be helpful in your view?
I think in theory, yes, but in practice, how would we do that? That's a question, right? And considering how fast the industry is moving, I think we need to be a little bit more pragmatic and think how can we adapt the pace and the way that regulation is developed to the changes that are happening on the technical side? And I wish I had the answer to that. I currently don't. But I think working closer with AI developers is one idea. Also, looking into that transparency and explainability from the technical perspective as well, that Seth just mentioned, I think that's a fantastic first step as well. And upskilling people, making sure that there are people who can raise those ethical questions is another thing that can be done. But I also wanted to comment on what you're just saying about different models being deployed for different reasons. I think one challenge that I'm seeing is that every time there is a new wave of AI-related innovation, all the companies, and actually that's not just the private sector, in the public sector we're seeing that as well. Everybody wants to, for example, everybody wanted to have LLMs. Now everybody will want to have agentic AI. And the challenge here is that actually it's really important to understand what kind of AI do you need before you deploy it. And I'm a big advocate of understanding user needs and understanding what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and then looking at what kind of AI is best in this particular application, rather than getting a certain thing just because it's the next new, shiny, hyped up way of deploying AI.
Yeah. And Fernando, are you seeing that it seems to me that there's like a disconnect between sort of what enterprises really want, which is something that's reliable, something that can actually accomplish some of these tasks, and what the vendors are pushing. And it's interesting there hasn't yet seemed to be that much feedback where the vendors are taking on board what industry is saying about what they need.
This is correct. But you can see it because the imagination of the world has been captured by these things where you now can imagine how AI can help you, and 5 years ago you need me to explain it to you. So now everybody can imagine it. So it's a wonderful place to capture everybody's imagination. That's become the thing. Give it another couple of years, and maybe we'll start looking at vendors that prefer, and maybe smaller vendors that focus more on these things. I kind of disagree with you on the other technologies at the moment. We're stuck with this way. These models, they work how they work. Nothing else surpasses them. Not state-space models. Not anything is even close. And little by little, by the way, follow the work that Anthropic is doing on explainability with sparse autoencoders and stuff. So we're trying to explain these. So little by little, I think, Jeremy, there's pieces being taken, but I think it's going to take yet a couple more years before the enterprise becomes like the focus of making these things work. It's what it is. But I think it's because it's captured the imagination of the world, and people want to capitalize on that imagination, right?
Yeah. Interesting. And Natalia, do you feel like we need to pull that instinct back a little bit and ground it in the here and now, and maybe that people are getting carried away, and that's part of the problem?
I think we need to know why we're doing things, and I think we also need to reframe the thinking that regulation stops innovation. I don't think that's true. I think they work together, and they need to work together for us to innovate in a way that's even greater.
Great. We're out of time, so I'm going to have to end it there. Thank you all for listening, and thank you to my panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.